So looking at cabinetry tonight for the kitchen, dining, and laundry room area. Let me turn everything back on here real quick. Okay, so let me actually turn this off. So at this point, this is what your tiny house should be looking like if you're all caught up. We've got walls, floors, and we did the stairs last week. You should have, mine doesn't have them all done, but you should have your doors and your windows finished at this point too. So today we're going to be looking at the cabinetry for, again, the kitchen. And so the first thing that I suggest you do is to create a new tag. And you can call it casework, cabinets, whatever makes sense to you. I called mine casework. And if you don't remember how to create a tag, you'll pull up your default tray over here on the right side, and if yours is not there, you will go up to Window in the top ribbon, hover over Default Tray, and click Show Tray, and that should bring up all of these little panels over here. And so one of those panels is tags, so just hit the little plus sign, and it'll create a new tag for you, and you can go in there and name it whatever you like. And then again, just as a reminder, you will want to make that new tag the active tag. And so the little pencil over on the right, that indicates which one is the active tag. So if you would like yours to be active, you just need to click on the right side of that tag and it'll open up. Something else that I've kind of noticed, this doesn't quite have anything to do with this, but I've noticed some of you have had trouble with a small little window here for your tags or your materials or whatever it is. Maybe it only looks like this, so you can only see one or two tags at a time. All you need to do is hover over the bottom of that little panel, and it should bring up the vertical arrows. You can just click and drag and make it as big as you'd like so that you can see all of your tags at once. That might make things a little bit easier for you. So we are going to model an upper cabinet, a lower cabinet with a countertop, and then I will let you all run with that. So let's first look at a lower cabinet, and I'm just going to model mine over here off in space to make it a little bit easier so that everybody can see what I'm doing easily, and we don't have to look through all the walls and floors and all that kind of stuff. So if I go to my Canvas module and I look at some of the dimensions that are given to us, I'm going to start with the lower cabinet and countertop. So cabinets, the width of them, they typically come in 3-inch increments. That's pretty standard. And I believe the smallest one you would see is going to be 12 inches. And that would just be drawers or a cabinet. That's still pretty small. Sometimes that's not very usable cabinet, but that should be probably the smallest one that you'll see is 12 inches. So then from there you just go up in 3-inch increments. So 12 inches to 15 inches to 18 inches, 21, so on and so forth. And then typically you don't want to make one single cabinet be more than, I believe, about 24 inches, because then it starts to get a little too heavy and it'll be wobbly on its hinges. So let's go ahead and start with the lowers. Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention to you, if you are modeling cabinetry that butts up right against the corner of a wall, so here, I guess I'll just draw it here real quick. Let's say that this here is a wall that I have. If I want to model some cabinetry that's right here against the corner, and I have some, don't pay attention to the way I'm modeling this. If I have some cabinet doors right here, if I try and open this left cabinet, it's not going to open all the way because it's being shoved up right against the wall. So you need to give yourself a little bit of space. So in the drawing here, About 1.5 inches is usually typical whenever you're right up against that wall to give your cabinet door a little bit of room to open up. You don't need that filler panel. Let's say if I started my cabinet over here. See, I've got plenty of room. I don't need to add in that little filler panel. If we look at the cabinets up here at the front of the room, I don't know if you can see them very well. They don't have the filler on the end because there's nothing restricting them from opening on the sides. But if these cabinets were over there against that wall, they would need a filler panel to be able to open up. That's true for lowers, uppers, full height cabinets, anything. The other portion of that would be if you had some L-shaped casework that hugs along both sides of this wall. So let me just draw that condition real quick. Again, pay zero attention to the way I'm modeling this. If you have cabinets that are butting up against each other here, those need even more room to breathe so that they can both be open and not be interfering with each other. So if that were the case, you need at least 3 inches inside of each corner before you can start to model your cabinets, just so that both of those can open without hitting each other. And that would be true for upper cabinets as well. Does that make sense? All right, let me get rid of this. So let's start with our lower cabinet. So some typical depths that we have here, 2 foot is going to be pretty standard. You can certainly have other depths, but I think that's a pretty standard dimension that we can use. So your cabinet itself would be 2 foot, and I'm going to say for our purposes that that would include the cabinet itself. So the entire front to back, 2 foot. And then you typically, for your base here, you'll pull that in probably about 3 inches. And then your countertop that sits on top is going to overhang your cabinets by about 3/4 of an inch. So those are just kind of the parameters that we're going to stick to for our class. I am not an interior designer. I'm not a millwork contractor, so if somebody more professional than myself tells you something different, then they're probably right. But that is what I practice with at my my jobs that I've had. So I think that's pretty standard. So if you want to just be on the outside of your building with me to kind of learn the cabinets, that's fine. Or if you want to go ahead and start looking at the placement within here. For this one, I kind of stuck to the DWG lines, but you're certainly welcome to mess around with it a bit more. So for a lower cabinet, I would start with my rectangle tool. And I'm going to make that rectangle 2 foot deep by whatever my 3-inch increment is wide. So for these purposes, I'm going to make it 2 foot deep by 3 foot wide. That would be 36 inches. That is an increment of 3. So I'm going to create a rectangle here. We'll do 2 foot, comma, 3 foot. Oops, I accidentally hit the enter button when I did into 2 foot by 3 foot, enter. And that's going to be where my base cabinet will start out. And so to make things easy, I might just start extruding this to the full 3 foot that we talked about. That's where the top of the counter is going to be at, 3 foot. So I'll use the push-pull tool to start dragging this upward, and either type in 36 for 36 inches, or you type in 3 foot and enter. from here, I will start to designate the different areas. So we have the base area, we have the cabinet area, and then we'll have the countertops. So if we think back to the dimensions that we had on Canvas, your base is going to be about 4 inches. So I'm going to grab this line here, use the Move tool, and hit Control for copy. And I'm just going to copy that line up 4 inches. And then for the countertop, I'm going to grab the top line, Move tool, Control for copy, and bring that down 1.5 inches. So now I've got the base, the cabinet space, and the countertop. So now I'm going to start carving out the space inside of my cabinets. And so I'm going to, I think I wrote on here that we'll go ahead and use 1 inch thickness for the different panels of the cabinets. So the sides, the back, the shelf, and the cabinet door itself. We're just going to make those all 1 inch. And so I'm going to grab the offset tool, and I will highlight the middle zone, which is where our cabinet doors are going to be. I'll click inside of there and start to pull inward, and I'm going to type in 1 enter for 1 inch offset. And from here, I'll grab the push-pull tool, and I'm going to bring this middle section back. I don't want to bring it back quite all the way, because then I'll create an opening in my cabinet, and that's not quite what I want. I still want a back panel in there. So I will click on this middle part, and we know that this is 2 foot deep. That's how deep I made my cabinet. So I can just type in 1 foot 11 and enter. And that shouldn't have gone through. I should now have a 1 inch panel in the back. And then I'm also going to extrude back the front portion to make room for my cabinet doors, because I want the whole thing, including the cabinet doors, to be 2 foot. So that means I need to push this back 1 inch to make room for those cabinet doors. And from here, you can add however many shelves you'd like, or maybe it's just open. Whatever you'd like the inside of your cabinet to look like. I'm going to create 2 shelves just so that we can revisit some tools that we learned before. You could use the linear array tool that we talked about. That's where we created 1 shelf and then used that linear array tool to copy it up a couple of times. You could also just grab one of your lines here, right-click, and hit divide, and that'll start to divide your line into equal segments. And so maybe I'll just do that. I'll create 3 equal segments. And from there, I can find where that point is and just start to model my shelf based off of that. So I'll bring that across and copy that line 1 inch down on the blue axis, making sure that we're indeed on the axis. And then I'm actually going to create a group out of that. So I just double clicked to select that surface and the lines that are bounding that surface, and right click. And I think I'll make a component of this one actually. So I'll hit Make Component, and this will be my lower cabinet shelf. Make sure that Replace Selection with Component is checked. If you don't have this box checked, it'll still create the component, but it won't put the component in place of the geometry that you have selected, which personally, I've never wanted that to happen. I don't want to create the component without putting it in place where it's at. So I don't really know why that's a thing, but so I just always make sure that that's checked. Hit create. And then I'm going to double click into that component to go into edit mode. Use my push-pull tool, grab that surface, and bring it towards the front. And if I start to hover over that front face of our cabinet, it should snap to that edge. And then I'll just click to finish. I got myself a nice little shelf. I'll click out of it to get away from that component. And then I'm just going to copy this shelf down to that other division point that we made. So I'll click on my shelf, activate my move tool, control for copy. I'd probably grab that back corner where we started our division so that once I start to copy it, I'll be able to find that point. So SketchUp should snap to that division endpoint. And I'll just click to copy and paste. So this might be what your inside of your cabinet looks like. Maybe you want to try something different. Totally fine. We're going to move on to the cabinet door now. So I'm going to start with my rectangle tool. And I'll start maybe in this top corner. And I'm going to bring it down and find the midpoint of the face of my cabinet. Can I find it? There it is. Right along the bottom. So we're going the entire distance of our cabinet. Not the base, not the countertop, but everything else in there. So I'm going to click at that midpoint to finish that. And you'll see that SketchUp kind of closed both of them. That's because we don't have everything else in a group. So all of these lines, SketchUp is still recognizing them as lines. So it said, hey, you've created 4 bounding lines. I can now close this as a surface. So if that happened, you can either just get rid of that surface by clicking it and hitting delete, or if you'd like to avoid this in the first place, I just did Control-Z to undo. Maybe you want to group your cabinet first. You can either make a component or a group. A component is probably good if you plan to copy this around and maybe make some edits. So I might right-click and make a component, and this can be my lower cabinet. And hit create. So now, if I were to do that step again, where I used my rectangle and started up at this corner, my little endpoint is now purple. So whenever you see a purple point, that usually means that a group or a component is involved somehow. If this was not in a component, it would be its typical green for an endpoint or blue for a midpoint. But when there's a purple, that probably tells you that you're modeling on top of a group and you're not inside of that group just yet. So I'm going to start from this corner, go back to my midpoint down here. There it is. And then when I do this time, it's not going to close that other side because all of these other lines are inside of a component. So SketchUp is not trying to use those lines to create surfaces. We're keeping it completely independent of each other that way. So that's why I like components and groups. It just helps keep things separate and organized. So now I'm going to double click on this new surface that I created to select the surface and all of its bounding lines. And I'm going to right click and make a component, because I love components, and call it cabinet door. And hit create. From here I can double click into that component, use my push-pull tool, and extrude it out 1 inch. And that should get you back to being flush with your base and your countertop where we originally started. So now that I'm inside of my cabinet here, you might choose to put some glass in your cabinet door. You can start to create your handle within this component. Whatever is working best for you. If you remember, we learned how to put glass in our doors when we did the bookcase exercise. So you might try that with offsetting inside and then creating a new surface with some glass. I think I did that in one of these other examples. Yep, these guys here. I put some glass doors on them. So you might choose to do that. And I'm lost in space. Scroll out. Come back over here. If you would like to create a handle, which you probably should, so that you can get into the cabinet, you can create your handle however you'd like. I'll just show you a pretty basic one. Like the ones that I did over here are just some simple knobs. I created a little bit of an opening back here and then the actual handle itself. So maybe let's create that one together. I'm lost again, just keep scrolling out and it will eventually figure itself out. Okay, back over here. So, for that, I'm going to create a guideline. So I have my tape measure tool, and I'm going to click on this edge on the what would be the inside part of the cabinet. It's going to open out, so this is going to be the inside. I'll click that and start to bring a guideline over. I'll do 2 inches. And then we don't want it too far down from the top because we don't want to have to bend down too low to get into the cabinet. So let's say I bring this down maybe 4 inches. Do I like that? That might be too high. I'm going to bring it back up another 2 inches. And so that's going to be my center point of my handle. So from here, what I did was grab the circle tool, and I found that intersection. SketchUp should snap to it. And click on that center point and start to drag outward. And you will specify the radius. That's what SketchUp is asking us in the bottom left-hand corner. And so I might do, I don't know, an 1/8 inch. So then you have a diameter of a 1/4 inch. I don't make handles, I don't really know if that's real, but. And then maybe I'll bring it out maybe a 1/2 inch. So you've got enough room to get your fingers back there to be able to grip onto the handlebar, or the handle. And then from here, I'll grab the circle tool again, and I'm going to find the center of this new line. It might not snap very well for you. So if that's the case, you can grab some grid lines again. Maybe pull in from this top edge, and then it should start to snap to the center point for you. So maybe you just first have to create a guideline to help yourself out. And then now I can grab my circle and it's giving me the center point. And start to pull it out. Maybe I'll make this radius be 1 inch. So then I have 2 inches total. And now I'll grab my push-pull tool and start to pull that outward. As you can see, we still have 2 surfaces here. Not a problem. We'll fix that. I'll just start to pull this one out first. Maybe a 1/4 inch. Then I'll just come back and grab that other one, make it flush, and then we can erase those extra lines. And then if you'd like, make a component. Maybe call it handle. All right, I'm going to click away to finish that. And now we can just copy our cabinet to the other side, but we're also going to mirror it or flip it. So I'm going to grab that door, use my move tool and control for copy. I'll grab a nice end point over here and pull it across to the other side. Click to finish. But our handle's on the wrong side. So I'll find the flip tool. And I want it to flip along the, not the red, the green. And then you should have two side by side. And then the last thing that we want to do is make sure that our base is pulled back and our countertop is pulled forward for a bit of an overhang. So I'm going to double click into the group that I created here. Use my push-pull tool to grab this bottom section for the base. Bring it back 3 inches. And then grab this top piece, which is the countertop, and bring it out 3/4. You can either type 3/4 or 0.75 and enter. Now you got yourself a nice little base cabinet. And then from here, if you wanted to create more, you could grab all this and copy it around. Let's say you wanted one that's just a little bit smaller. We had components, but we've learned how to make a unique component. So if you wanted one that's a little bit smaller, you just need to right-click, hit Make Unique. And then from there, you could go in and start to modify it a little bit. Maybe it just wants to be 3 inches smaller. So we might move our handle over 3 inches. And I'm going to move this one out of the way really quick so that I could see it. Come back into here, pull this back 3 inches, and since I made it a unique component, it's not going to affect my other one here. And then what you can also do is this other cabinet door is still at the size of the first ones, but we want it to match this new unique component. In your default tray, you should have a panel called Components. And if you drop that down, it gives you a list of all the components that are in your model. So, if you're nice and organized and you know what you've called different things, it should be cabinet door right now. You should be able to bring your other, this cabinet door number 1. You can just pull that. All I did was click and drag from that panel, and now you can place another instance of your component. Or, you could just do the same process of copying and flipping it. Okay, let's move on to the upper cabinet unless there are questions. Yeah?
Is there a way that you can open the cabinet slightly?
Okay, let's move on to upper cabinets. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a grid line so that I know where to start my upper cabinets. So I'll grab my tape measure tool, and starting at the top of the counter, we will click once and start to pull it up along that blue axis. And I'm going to hit 2 foot enter, and that'll be the start of your bottom of your cabinet. If you look back at the Canvas module, we're still using the heights that are specified here. So we're going to put 2 foot between our countertop and the bottom of our base cabinet. And then I'm just going to create an upper cabinet that is 2 foot tall. You could certainly create it. If you did 3 foot, that should get you to the underside of our second floor. So maybe if you want cabinets that go up to the ceiling, you could choose to do that. I'll just do a 2 foot cabinet here. And then the depth for this, typical, is 1 foot 3 or 15 inches. Come back to here. So then maybe I'll create a second grid line on top of that, which is 1 foot 3 above. And that should be the space where I'm going to put those cabinets. I'm going to delete these other guidelines. I think they're all on the side of here. There we go. Oh, I didn't like this one. Okay. And then just to help myself out to get things lined up, I might also create a grid line that's flush with the side of my cabinet. Oops. Oh, darn it. I got lost. Oh my goodness. Okay, there I am. Okay, and then my first one was 36 inches, so I'll bring this one across 36 inches as well. One thing that I'm noticing on these bottom cabinets, maybe we just want to copy the cabinets themselves so that we can just bring one nice countertop slab across instead of having these lines. Additionally, what you could do is, if you really wanted to go in here and hide your lines or soften your lines, but probably a better practice would just be to have copied those cabinets and then have a nice solid piece of countertop coming across the cabinets. Okay, so here we are with the upper cabinets. I've created some guidelines for the top, bottom, and sides. So then I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and just start at the intersection here. SketchUp should snap for you and bring it across to the other side. This would be a good place to start your group or your component. I'll call this one my upper cabinet. Great.
How do you get your snaps working?
Okay, and then from here we are going to use the push-pull tool. Whoops, I created a component, so I need to double-click into it. Push-pull tool. Bring it 1 foot 3 out. And enter. And then from here you just do the same steps that we did for the lower cabinets. You would use your offset tool, grab this surface, bring it in 1 inch, push-pull this middle section back. This time we would do 1 foot 2 so that we still have 1 inch for the back panel. And then if you wanted to create a shelf or even some vertical dividers in here, you could go ahead and do that. I'm just going to create a single shelf on this one. So we'll snap to the midpoint, and bring it across to the other midpoint. If I wanted to keep that line perfectly centered, I would just move this line up a 1/2 inch, and then copy it down 1 inch. So then my shelf would be completely centered. You might make a group here or a component, whichever is going to work best for you. Go in here, pull it up here. And actually I'm going to leave 1 inch of space for a cabinet. Come back to this main group, pull this back by an inch so that we have room for our cabinet doors. And then outside of the group, that's where I might start to create my cabinet door. So I've got my rectangle, starting at the top corner, bringing it to the midpoint. Double click the surface to select it all, right click, make a component, call it upper cabinet door. Double click into it to start to edit. Pull it out 1 inch. And then from here, like we learned just a minute ago, I can just, oops, that's a different handle, that's my door handle. I gotta find my handle. There it is. So I can click and drag that guy out. And it'll try and find a face. It'll orient to whatever face you're hovering over. So if I bring it here, then it will be parallel with the face that I'm on. And then I just release the mouse. And now I have a door handle without having to copy it or redo it or any of that kind of stuff. And then if I just want to get it in my correct place, I can create some guidelines. Look over here, and I think we did 2 inches from the side, and we'll do the bottom this time. And then I'm going to go grab my handle here. You'll find the end of it, the furthest edge, which I think is this one. And I'll align that to this intersection here. And then pull it over that 1/8 inch, which was our radius, so that it'll be centered. Erase my guidelines. Now we've got your upper cabinet door. We can copy it over to the other side. Flip tool. And flip that guy there. Did I do 2 feet? That's a very squatty looking cabinet. I don't think I did 2 feet. I only did 1'3". Well, you get the point. That's on me. But the principle is still there. And like we learned, if you wanted to rotate this guy open, grab your rotate tool or hit Q. I'm going to hit shift so that it stays on the blue axis here. And grab my corner of my upper cabinet door. Start to bring it out, and then maybe I'll open it 45 degrees. There it is. Alright, I think this is where I will leave you to start designing your own casework. Are there any questions?